Okay, we're live. Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the March 2nd Planning, Economic Development and Housing Committee, known as PDH. This meeting is being broadcast and streamed from the Hartford Public Access Television, Comcast and Frontier Government Channels 96 and 6032. It will also be streamed via HPA-TV.org and the HPTV's Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV. It will also be rebroadcasted and made available on HPA-TV YouTube page. Today, we have my colleagues and members, Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon. We have Councilman Nick LeBron, Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti, also Councilman John Gale, Councilwoman Diana Hercules, and I'm just looking at my screen, trying to get everything collected here. Okay, and we also have Director Looney from DPW. We have also Judith Rothschild from Development Services, who helped draft one of the ordinances that we're going to view today. And also, we also have from the Land Bank, Mr. Runan Rulampalam and Nat Gale, as well as Erin Howard from Development Services. Nat Gale's from the Mayor's Office. And we will continue with this once, and I will announce when everyone else starts joining this meeting. Also, we just been joined by Director Liani Arroyo from the Health Department. So our first item on our agenda, hold this up here. Is an ordinance amending the housing code. And we had a public meeting just recently, back on February 22nd, 2022. So with that said, I would like to again introduce Director Liani Arroyo and Judith Rothschild to speak on this ordinance. Hello, Director.
Hi, thank you. Judith, do you want to start just talking about the housing code piece of this, and then I'll chime in on the lead part?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, members of this council committee. Very happy to present to you and for the first time meet some of you. I have before you, on behalf of the mayor, some ordinance amendments, clarifications to the existing housing code for the city of Hartford. I will run through them very quickly for you and take any questions after Director Arroyo's presentation that you would like to give me. In regards to the housing code, first in the provision under the blight remediation ordinance, section 9-94D, we are asking the council to consider adding an additional form of service that would be available for the code enforcement division within blight remediation to send notices to property owners, responsible parties in violation of our blight remediation ordinance. And it would be to add an avenue of sending via email. That would require for it to be effectuated as good service, a receipt acknowledged by the recipient of it that they have in fact received it. And it would be sent obviously electronically because it would be via email. We expect that would shorten the time for giving notice to the landlords, which would in turn shorten the time to expect compliance and receive compliance on the needed corrections. We have also asked in the same section in a lower sentence that there be a shortening of the current provision of a period of 10 days, which is presently allowed to correct blight remediation issues, to that which may be necessary in the interest of life or health of any person to a shorter time period. So presently it has to be 10. This would give discretion to the blight remediation director, that being myself, to shorten the time where it's appropriate under those conditions. The next section, section 2, is as to Housing Code Provision 18-22. And what that does is it adds a penalty which is enforceable by a state fine, which would be in accordance with the Municipal Powers Act allowance to municipalities to have a fine penalty for violations of a municipal code. Presently, we have a very strong citation provision which allows violations to be cited and to have fines imposed at the municipal level against a property owner, but we lack an enforceability tool, which has been in the past for this city and for cities around the state and towns, a very helpful tool, which is referral to the Office of the State's Attorney at the Housing Court in Hartford for prosecution in such cases that are deemed appropriate for referral to that office. So this would give the allowance of that within the housing code. And that would apply to the rental licensing program violations, which presently has no penalty for violation. It would add to the housing code violation abilities, and it would also add to, I think, our tools in the city of Hartford in order to produce the result we're looking for with health and safety compliance, including in the rental licensing program. Section 18-24G, I'll defer first to Dr. Arroyo. This is the lead provision that was discussed, and I'll follow up as needed and go back to the rest after, please.
I keep getting called Dr. Arroyo. My mother thanks you. I'm just Liani Arroyo.
Okay, Liani Arroyo, thank you.
It's a joke with Councilwoman Rossetti as well. So we worked closely with housing originally when this change was being discussed. And as we worked to operationalize this, or as Judith's shop worked to operationalize this, it became apparent that the wording that we used was not the appropriate wording that we were intending to do when we were initially talking about this a number of years ago. And so we went back and working with Judith and also speaking to the state, went back and chose to make a change here that instead of lead inspection, it's a lead risk assessment by a certified lead inspector. The rest of the piece remains the same. There's a big difference between an inspection and a risk assessment from the terms of what it triggers in code. And we felt that looking at this, that a risk assessment would ensure what we're trying to do, which is to ensure that any places where we would deem that lead could risk are adequately taken care of, meaning if there's chipped paint, that paint is covered over. Those sorts of big pieces that are important. And so it would look at window wells to make sure there's no peeling paint there. That's a huge source of lead. It would look at peeling paint in other places. Those are the big sources of lead for children in our community. And so the risk assessment would ensure that those areas that are risk factors for children being exposed to lead are addressed. It is an opportunity to be able to operationalize this in a much more effective manner and also really prevent any unintended consequences, which would be numerous, triggering lots of state things on our end if lead is detected in a home, even though no one's been lead exposed. It would also be huge cost and not necessarily adequate resources like our lead loan program to be able to address this. Could bring the opportunity, the potential of reducing housing stock and many other factors. So the risk assessment would allow us to ensure that kids are and children are being safe in their homes without triggering many things that were not what we were intending to do when we were writing this up as part of this. So I'll stop there.
Director, and before I hand the floor over to my colleagues, I do have a couple of questions. So can you share with us and for the community to understand, I think it's been a long time since it's been shared, the importance of remediating the lead from a home. And I believe it's from homes from 1978 and prior, or is this all homes? There's two questions. If you could share the importance about why we need to worry about lead poisoning and how does it affect children. And also, does it include all homes or just homes from 1978 and back?
So it is 1978 and back because that is when lead-based paint, that's really the primary thing that we're looking at in many of these inspections. Lead-based paint was used for homes. And as everyone's aware, and as Director Rothschild can discuss, we have a very old housing stock in the city of Hartford. And so there has likely been lead paint used in many homes, but if lead paint is not disturbed, lead paint and the lead that's in that paint does not become a factor in terms of being hazardous to a child. Lead is a heavy metal. It tends to fall on the ground, right? Or it tends to be eaten either through paint chips, which is how many children become lead poisoned, or through the use of lead pottery or pots. We also have found when things are being imported from other countries, sometimes spices, there has been lead found in different spices that are imported from different countries into the US. And so lead is a heavy metal that is toxic. It is particularly toxic to young children, hence the under 6 provision as part of this. And the under 6 provision is 6 and under provision is also important because, again, when we talk about lead, it is a heavy metal and it settles into the dust that falls on the ground. And that is where children spend their time. So the toys may be on the ground, they may be putting them in their mouths, and that tends to be the way children become lead poisoned. And so the city has had a, I would say a fairly robust lead remediation and abatement program here that has been funded through a grant from the from HUD, Housing and Urban Development. We've had this grant now, I believe it's been over 18 years or so is the last time I checked. We have remediated a number of units. I don't have the exact number in front of me, I'm sorry. I looked it up and I forgot, but many, I think over 2,000 units maybe in the city over that time period through this grant. We're at the end of this last cycle where we had funding to remediate 200 or 197 units, and we will be reapplying for that. In the time that we've been doing this work, we went from number 1 in the number of lead poisoned children to number 3, and I believe that number will continue to fall. So it is something we take very seriously. We are required by the state of Connecticut to do epidemiological investigations of children that are determined to have been lead poisoned. And then we work with families of children who have been deemed to be lead exposed. The state of Connecticut has guidelines for what constitutes lead poisoning and what constitutes lead exposure. And so we work closely with our partners like CCMC and providers' offices when children have been identified as being lead poisoned or lead exposed. And we're able to bring many of the units that these children live in into our program to do either remediation or abatement, depending on the issues that are found. But we have had properties have new windows put in, walls repainted and sealed, things removed. It is a very, a pretty comprehensive program, and on average on a unit cost about $12,000 for us to be able to make lead safe, which means lead is encapsulated. It's not always removed or abated. Sometimes it's encapsulated because the lead could be buried under 5 or 6 or 9 or 10 layers of paint because the unit is older. And so we will continue to encapsulate that. And then we work with the property owners to ensure that they understand their obligation to continue to maintain that property. And so the lead risk assessment would ensure that that maintenance is occurring, that things are covered, that anything is encapsulated or painted over, that windows are in good condition, that there's not lead dust coming from the windows, which is a big area on old wooden windows that have been repainted that we have seen in the past.
And thank you for that. And then now just another question, the lead abatement program, who qualifies for this? Does a owner occupied of a, let's say 3-unit apartment building or a 6-unit apartment building, and the owner living there, of course, do they qualify, or does anyone qualify, including single family homes?
Muted myself, sorry. HUD funds funds us. They also, I believe, grant funding to CCMC. And for us, our application is focused on apartments because those are things that turn over more. So we know that more children will live in. We rarely will touch a single family home simply because it is a lot more expensive and there's not a lot of throughput in a single family home that's owner occupied. We're looking for places where there will be children living in or children spending a great deal of time in. So I just want to be clear. So if you have a grandma that's in a unit across the hall from her grandkids, but she's taking care of her grandkids all the time, we can bring that unit in as well. There are income qualifications that we're required to do. And so when we go in and let's say if we have a perfect six and we're going in because of one unit where a child has been exposed, our goal is to take the whole building rather than just that one unit. So if one of those units happens to be owner occupied, as long as there's a meeting of the income guidelines, we can work with HUD to take the whole building and do the entire building. So that's sort of the work, but we can provide you that. There's a child 6 and under has to be living in the unit or spending a large amount of time there, and everyone needs to meet the income requirements.
I might add, Councilman, in the housing department of DDS, Brian Matthews, when he loans out money out from the Housing Preservation Loan Fund, he also performed lead inspections. And if in fact there's a problem relative to lead, they have the funds to take care of that issue on 1, 2, or 3 families.
And I'll also add that CCMC does do work on single family homes.
Sure.
They have a separate pot of money, not only from HUD, but also from the state of Connecticut to do single family homes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then I also want to recognize Mr. I. Charles Matthews from Development Services Director, and also Richard Visaggio from Corp Counsel. And before I yield the floor to my colleagues, the issues of the lead or signs and symptoms of lead poisoning are as follows. It can cause developmental delay, learning difficulties, irritability, loss of appetite, weight loss, sluggishness and fatigue, abdominal pain, vomiting, constipation, hearing loss, and etc. So it's important that those who own multifamily units look into this, reach out to the Department of Health and Mr. Brian Matthews from Development Services if you are seeking to utilize this lead abatement program. So I yield the floor to my colleagues. Anyone have any questions? Councilman Nick LeBron.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair. The question is for you. There's going to be multiple people speaking on this item, correct?
We had a public hearing on it, and
right.
Folks did speak on this in favor of this amendment.
No, I wasn't talking about I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I was talking about multiple people presenting on this tonight. I misspoke.
So we have Judith.
Okay.
The folks that just spoke.
Okay. All right. So sorry. So the question that I have, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The first question I have is in terms of a part of this ordinance is in regards to email addresses. And so, and then there was something mentioned about 1978. So the question I have is, what have we done to try to seek out those email addresses and to make sure that, in fact, we do have the potential of folks before 1978 when email wasn't prevalent, or maybe that's a moot point. So that's a question I have.
I can answer that through you, Councilman Sanchez. Yes. Councilman LeBron, what we have intended and what we have been doing is taking those email addresses provided to us by the property owners, primarily through the rental licensing program, which requires that they submit a very extensive application, including that information. So we are going off of something that they have provided, or on some occasions, we have had correspondence with them back and forth on housing code ordinance violations, and they have given us that, or in person have provided us that information. So it's coming either directly from their production through an application given to the city to DDS, or it's coming from some other communication from them. And then they have to acknowledge receipt for us to consider it properly served.
Thank you. And
Yes,
a
sir.
follow-up through you, Mr. Chair. So the second question is the last line in the resolution in regards to enforcement. There is an imprisonment or subject to imprisonment added, or maybe it's added, or it had existed already. Historically, in terms of enforcement, have we ever imprisoned anyone for this? Is there precedent for that? Or yeah, just questioning that that added line.
Thank you. Through the chair again, if I may. The provision of 30 days imprisonment is in the existing code as it was enacted in 2019. It is through this amendment proposal going to be removed. As to its historical implementation, I don't have the historical information. I can say in my former position with the state's attorney's office for 30 years, that would be considered an unenforceable provision because it exceeds the allowance of enforceable penalty under the Municipal Powers Act. And so what we are doing in this amendment, what we are proposing the council do through this amendment is to enable a penalty which is enforceable through the Housing Court Prosecutor's Office, which would be a fine of $250 per day, eliminating what is believed in ultra vires or beyond the authority provision for jail time. So it would not be available any longer. It would not even be in writing any longer.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Councilman Gale?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, does, and I apologize if I wasn't following along, does that mean that a particular property owner could still be arrested, but the penalty could no longer be jail, just fines?
Through the chair, yes, sir, it is. It would mean that. And as far as arrest, I mean, I don't think that it would be likely that it would be a physical arrest. Generally, of course, it's up to the prosecutor's office in what manner they choose to proceed on charges, but it would be the equivalent of a fine. So it would be less than a misdemeanor, certainly less than a felony, what would be deemed a violation, but a non-criminal offense. So it would be a summons into court almost always. And that would be the method of service of the person of the criminal charges. But yeah, they could still be brought before the court on the penalty, but not exposed to this incarceration penalty.
So quick anecdote. First of all, I would love you to have been the prosecutor who was involved in the case I'm going to tell you about. Probably about 20 years ago, I was the conservator for an individual who died, and then I became the administrator, and he had a 9-unit apartment building in Hartford. And a young child got lead poisoning. And the city of Hartford jumped into action at that point in time and immediately referred it to the state's attorney's office. And I found myself as an attorney under arrest at the housing court. Now, this was all done in a very genial fashion where I was told, show up and present yourself. But, for anybody out there that's listening, sure enough, you can get arrested. And I did get arrested. And I think at the time, they probably told me there was the potential for jail. But the bottom line was everybody was just interested in getting the lead abated. And certainly at that time, it wasn't Brian Matthews, but the housing department of the city of Hartford jumped into action and provided me with a grant, since I was really, just acting as an agent here. But they provided me with a grant. The property got abated. The criminal charges went away. But the whole thing was a little nerve-wracking at times, and certainly entertainment for all my colleagues at the bar, as I was presented in housing court, full court full of lots of other lawyers, and the judge looks down at me, Attorney Gale, you're here for what? And I got arrested. Anyway, just thought I would throw that out there as an anecdote.
Chair, if you don't mind, Councilman Sanchez,
Sure.
Councilman Gale has shared the story with me. That's why I had a big Cheshire grin on, because I knew where this was going. Was not laughing at his situation, his predicament, but just having heard this. But when he said this story a couple years ago, as he was discussing this with me, I think one of the things I pointed out, and I'd like to point out as well, is that under Connecticut general statute, when a child is lead poisoned in a unit, the case follows the property, not the owner. And so if that property changes hands, we will continue to try to get that unit into compliance. And so that's just something for people to think about. Don't think because you change ownership or do quick claim deeds and all of this that you can avoid whoever picks up the unit after that, or the apartment after that, ownership of it. We will try to bring that unit into compliance, because we're required to try to do that. So just FYI for everyone out there listening.
And if I can add, Council Sanchez, I'm sorry, Councilman Sanchez, just the housing code won't carry a criminal penalty of jail time, but the health code does, and it's enforced through Landani Arroyo's department. FYI, the building code does, the fire safety code and prevention codes do, but the housing code is a violation only. That's the level that it should be at under current Connecticut law. So it could be Councilman Gale was prosecuted under the state health code, but I don't think I was the prosecutor, sir. And I'm glad it worked out for you.
So am I.
So I just want to piggyback on something here. So if as you know, in the last 7 years, especially 4 years ago, when there was an issue with slumlords, all right, when you have a property owner or / slumlord who neglects knowing that there's lead issues and just neglects it, how is this ordinance going to address that? Or is it what you just said? It's not, I mean, it doesn't sound like it has the teeth to address it when we have slumlords, especially when they don't live here in the city. How is that addressed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would, through you, sir, I would say that this code is not the only tool available to the city of Hartford. If there is a property which would be in the slumlord kind of condition, the housing code can be cited, which is a violation. The blight remediation code can be cited, which will have a violation if this proposed ordinance is adopted and put into action by the city council. There's also provisions available still under the public health code, where it applies under the fire codes, fire prevention code, the building code, and all of those codes that I've mentioned, with the exception of the blight remediation code and the housing code, carry misdemeanor penalties and can be referred to the housing court for prosecution as the state's attorney's office deems appropriate. And it can also be brought through civil action by the Office of the Corporation Counsel, or both. So the answer is there's a lot of tools available. It is the intention of DDS under I'm Charles Matthews, and in coordination with the mayor's directives, to make sure that the housing code stock is safe and healthy for people, and to use those tools as best we can. This proposed ordinance change will assist us in doing that.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that Ms. Rothschild had completed her review of the ordinance. I think we kind of got stopped.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Rothschild.
It's fine, sir. I will quickly go through the other provisions. Section 4 will allow simply a change in language that the 21 to 60 day period allowed for correction of a cited violation under the housing code can be from the date of service rather than from the date of mailing. That reasoning is because we want to make sure now that we're adding clarification of an email availability of service, that we're talking about from that date, not a postal mailing period, to expedite receiving compliance with the ordinance. Section 5 will be another provision within the housing code allowing for that additional service option of email service. Section 6 will be clarifying that if penalties are to be affixed, in addition to the citation process I spoke of earlier, that there can be a penalty of a fine in accordance with the Municipal Powers Act. Section 7 will allow a director of license and inspection the authority to grant extensions of time to property owners who are reasonably asking for one to correct a violation if the director deems that request reasonable and for good cause. Certainly there are landlords who cannot comply within the time frame originally given in an order for good reasons. This will give some flexibility to allow that. And the standard generally, so you know, is where the review of the case in condition of the property, the risk level to any occupant of the property, the reasons for the extension request are all reviewed, and it's deemed that there is no immediate risk or hazard to an occupant if this were to be granted an extension. And finally, we are asking for an ordinance correction, if you will, to 18-104C to specifically add the 250-day allowed violation penalty in the Municipal Powers Act and removing that incarceration penalty from the current section due to its unenforceability. And that is all. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a message here, and it's a question, of course, and I'll read it out. If a unit or units are found to have peeling paint led through risk assessment process, will this be public information for prospective tenants? And if so, where can the information be found?
So we don't have a process to publicly post that. That would be through an FOI. But if something has led, we would work with DDS to ensure that there's no opportunity to provide a rental license to that unit.
Okay, thank you.
May I add, sir? May I add
yes.
to that? Just also, in addition, we would require that the unit that's found to have paint which is unsafe after that risk assessment be corrected. And that would be in accordance with a guidance document which has been posted on the Department of Development Services website and in accordance with current lead regulations as to making a place lead safe.
Thank you. Any question from my colleagues, members? No comments, questions? Can we entertain the motion?
Move that we send it back with a favorable recommendation to council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Okay, it passed. It'll be sent to council favorably. Thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation and explaining what lead poisoning is about. And thank you so much for working on this ordinance and amending it to where it should be. And I'm sure, you know, this is a live ordinance. If any other issues may arise that may be addressed through the change or amending of this ordinance, I'm more than sure that it will be applied. Thank you so much. If you don't have the time to stay on with us, it's all right if you sign off. Thank you. So Moving on to the next item, which is 2.2, a resolution calling for designated parking areas for tractor trailers. Who do we have here that's going to speak on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Nat Gale, Director of Capital Projects and Operations. I'll be speaking on this evening.
Oh, okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, members of the Court of Common Council. As I mentioned, my name is Nat Gale, Director of Capital Projects and Operations here at the City of Hartford. I'm here to discuss a little bit about what we've been doing since Council has adopted this resolution. So, you've asked our staff to work on solutions to address the issue of illegally parked tractor trailer trucks, specifically in residential neighborhoods. And so we actually have an interdepartmental transportation working group. We call it the transportation team, or the T-team for short, that has taken this issue up and has been working on a multi-pronged approach to addressing that issue. So really, I'm here representing that group, and I just want to acknowledge the folks who have been working on this. That's Adam Michael Murphy, our new sustainability assistant, Grace Yee in development services, along with Amy Chambers from the Director of Planning, Mingo Gomes, our head of the Hartford Parking Authority, as well as Janice Castle. Members from Hartford Fire and Hartford Police are also in that working group. And so we've been looking at current regulations, evaluating our capacity for active enforcement, as well as researching best practices from other municipalities and trying to identify alternative parking locations. Unfortunately, there's really only one commercial parking location that primarily serves tractor trailer parking in Hartford. It's the Pride Travel Center on Jennings Road. Development Services has been looking for any city-owned property that may be eligible, but unfortunately, because of the required size and turning radius for trucks, thus far, they have been unsuccessful. And really, this evening, we just want to present our initial assessment on amending the current ordinance, which we hope can be worked on in collaboration with you before any final proposals. So this is nothing for adoption and forwarding to full council. It's just an update on where we are. So our current language states that any tractor trailer, semi-trailer, truck, or commercial vehicle is subject to a fine of $100 and the cost of removal if the vehicle is parked for more than 3 hours, except for the purpose of delivery or commercial activity. And that does pose an enforcement challenge currently. The Hartford Parking Authority and the Hartford Police Department, their traffic, their enforcement division has to identify that the vehicle is parked, note the time in which they first identify it, and then come back 3 hours later in order to comply with the current code. And so that presents just a staffing challenge. And in addition to that, once they have identified that it's been parked for 3 hours, they have to call a specialized towing company that can handle these larger trucks. And so these companies are limited in number and oftentimes take up to 1 or 2 hours to arrive on the scene. So what we're looking at in the current ordinance, what we're looking at changing is removing the line, for more than 3 hours, so that so long as the enforcement officers observe a tractor trailer, a semi-trailer that is parked, that is not doing, a commercial activity, it is not delivering, it is actually just parked, there would be no time restraint, and it would allow for an enforcement activity to happen, including the $100 fine and up to and including the towing and removal, if that tractor trailer is not removed from the residential area. That's where we are today. Again, we're not putting that forward yet as a recommendation because we want to continue to do research on other municipalities' fee structure, as well as other opportunities for, this is the sort of the stick side, right? The carrot side would be trying to find other locations, and we haven't completed that work, but we continue to do that research. So happy to answer any questions, happy to, would really love input from this group in terms of other things you're looking for our T-team to take up with this issue.
Thank you, Nat. So I have a question before I pass it on to my colleagues. So who enforces the issue of tractor trailers or these commercial vehicles parked in neighborhoods.
Could I do this, Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Often,
absolutely.
often you don't have a tractor trailer. That's 2 units. Normally, what you will have is a tractor parked on the street. If you go to the Blue Hills and other neighborhoods, you'll see the tractor without the trailer. And sometimes you will find the tractor in someone's driveway, not on the street. So that's an issue that comes up often too, Nat.
Yes, and Director Matthews, I completely agree with you, but I did have an incident where there was a full tractor trailer on Bate Street in the south end, literally blocking a couple of driveways and was there for hours. So
Wow.
I did call HPD on this. It has always been an issue with tractor trailers actually going through the neighborhood on Cumberland and Princeton Street, which I believe is also not allowed. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gale. But also you have the commercial vehicles, the big, massive box trucks that are parked in the neighborhood, and flatbeds as well. Also, I'm not sure what you call it, but they carry like 3 vehicles, car transports. So, you know, this has been an ongoing issue. What I do is I take a photo, I put it into an email form, and I just send it out to HPD, or I just send it directly to the traffic enforcement. But now the question here, though, I don't believe is only HPD that's responsible to address this. Is that correct?
So yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, HPD is certainly our enforcement entity and has the capability of enforcing against tractor trailers. I believe that the parking authority has that authority as well, but that is one thing that we are looking to clarify and strengthen in this ordinance, is who has the regulatory authority to cite, ticket, and call for towing of these vehicles.
Okay, Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Matt, believe me, I think I'm also experiencing the same issue of the tractor and then also the box cart that's attached to it. When you mentioned that there's only one commercial property that we have in the city in Jennings Road that, you need to be able to turn around, so on and so forth. Is there any other property we could look at? It doesn't have to be city owned. It could be an opportunity for someone to start a business by providing, if there is a large lot, we could have absolutely, especially, one of the problems we have in the neighborhood is, they park on the street, and as Councilman Sanchez says, blocking the driveway. By the time you call the police, yes, I do agree with you, the 3 hours really needs to be eliminated. Also, because of the supply chain issues we've had in America, $100 fine is just not enough for these guys, because they are really hauling and they're really working a lot of hours. And so they park, and if they paid $100 fine, the cost of towing, they would gladly do it. So I would ask you to go look into increasing the fine. Also, I know there was an issue regarding only certain towing trucks can tow the tractor, and then you have the box cart that's just dropped in the street while the tractor part of it is gone. How do you get the box cart, removed? That's an issue. So one thing is, looking around the city and seeing it may not be city-owned property, but again, it could be an opportunity for someone to start a business within the city. Working with Mr. Matthews, I'm sure we could do with something, because it's something that is really needed right now. And you're finding that all the neighborhoods from both the north and the south of the city is going through the same issues. Yep. And then on top of that, the snow cleaning.
Right.
Okay, where, it's a snow the other day, the tractor trailer parked on my street, and you could just see where they went around the tractor trailer, with the snow, so it is becoming a major issue, especially since the supply chain issue that is happening. So yeah, I would gladly love to give you some more ideas, so I can write them up and I can forward them to you. And thank you, and thank the team for doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Through you. Thank you, Miss.
Thank you.
Councilman LeBron?
Yes, so I'm going to be saying the same thing as my council colleagues, not to piggyback, but to, just show the significance of this issue coming from a lot of different voices. And the other thing too is the amount of parking that they take from residential folks that live in the communities. And so, the trailer with the box in the back, as Councilwoman Surgeon said, that's like 6 spaces. And if you put that in a neighborhood, folks don't have anywhere to park. And so the only thing I have to say, and excuse my simplicity of this in terms of enforcement, in terms of timing, I used to really like this show called Parking Wars. And in Parking Wars, what they would do is they had like a piece of chalk, and they would put a tick mark on the tire. And that would, alert any other police officer or what have you. And then, that was kind of the first marker. And then when you go back, if that tick mark was still there, that would be reflective of the 3 hours. And that seemed to work, at least on the show Parking Wars. So I'm not sure, but I know you were looking for solutions and ideas, and sometimes we overthink things and think about technology and how to enforce these things and create apps and those type of things. But there's other cities and towns that have been dealing with this issue and have been able to enforce without the technological advances that we all seem to crave. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Yes. And it's all right. So I just to piggyback on both Councilwoman Surgeon and Councilman LeBron, I have been driving throughout the city to look at this, and definitely they're all over in the north end and the south end. And what I have noticed though on Windsor Street, there's approximately I will say an acre of land that I've noticed. Quite a few tractors and both tractor and trailers hooked up, parked over there. So I'm not sure if that's a private business that's charging, but I think it's a great idea that it exists. I have been approached by owners of these tractors, and I look at it as a mobile business, right? And obviously we should be supporting our local businesses, right? But unfortunately, this is a pretty unique situation where you can't just drive your business and park it in the neighborhood of that size. The other idea and thought that I have, we have the farmers market, which is, in my opinion, underutilized and maybe we can engage with the state Hartford delegation to see if we can set aside in that farmers market a section for tractors and trailers to be parked there as a temporary basis until something can be planned out for these individuals that own these type of businesses. Anyone else has a comment or question? Councilman Gale?
I'm sorry.
So I'm just making sure that I'm understanding. What I'm hearing from administration is that they're intending to come back to council at some point with a revised ordinance, and that the revised ordinance is going to have at least 3 things in it. 1, a change in the time necessary to give a ticket.
Correct.
2, potentially a change in the fine structure, having looked at other towns and making sure that we're up to date on that. And 3, making sure that enforcement can be at least by HPD and the Hartford Parking Authority. Am I correct in my understanding on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the member is correct.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Surgeon?
Um, just to tell you, there is private, not just over by Jennings Road on Windsor Avenue, this lot that you saw what the tractor trailers are parked there. It's also owned by a private person. And I've talked to the person, and one of the problems is that the tractor trailer guys, they don't want to pay the fees for parking their trucks. So that was a major issue. And so when I asked about increasing the fine from $100 or more, you know, to them, that is like chump change in the amount of money they're making right now. So that's why they're just parking on the street, and they, you know, the next morning they're gone. And
Mr. Chair, just a question through you.
Yes, Director.
Through Nat, to make sure DDS is aware. Are we also going to deal, or is there a problem if someone has a tractor and they pull their tractor on their property and park in their driveway? Because I've seen that as I drive through the city. They're not on the street, but they have a nice 3-bedroom house on Granby Street or somewhere in the Blue Hills, and they pulled their truck right up on their driveway and they park next to their home on their property. Is that going to be considered? Is that a problem that you think you have to work on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is not something that has come up in our review. That is currently allowed in the zoning code. So I see Councilwoman Rossetti is.
No, I've debated that in the Southwest oftentimes with the police department. That is not allowed. That is not allowed.
that is not allowed. I agree with you, Councilman Rossetti. I've had those same conversations with the police officer. It's not allowed.
Well, right.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think Director
Sorry,
Matthews.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Don't worry.
Director Matthews brings up a good point, and clearly other members have experienced this. So I will add that as a fourth item to the prior members' list of things that we'll be looking at in clarifying as part of this ordinance.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Only I say that is absolutely, my neighbors would say, you know, again, like Director Matthews said, you have driveway and giant, you know, it doesn't even fit. And then their cars are parked in the street. It's a slippery slope to just the same thing, but in reverse. So that has to be addressed. Absolutely. In the driveway.
You know
what would be allowed in West Hartford? That would not.
No.
Thank
I
you,
agree with you,
Councilwoman
Councilwoman.
Rossetti.
Thank
Totally.
you.
So, you know, it is also, the information is not out there for these folks to know and understand that that's not allowed. For example, parking on your lawn, that's not allowed. That's against the law. Even police officers are not aware of this. So I think, you know, we need to have some kind of a outreach and allowing, or at least educating everyone to understand that if they see this, they can call HPD or HPA, Hartford Parking Authority, or the council's office, so we can have this addressed. But I do have one more question, and I'm hoping you can put it on your list. It should be a simple task, is to find out when these you know, owners get their license to drive these tractor trailers, okay? I'm more than sure that the education they receive also includes that they are not allowed to drive through neighborhoods that are not for commercial vehicles, as well as parking in neighborhoods. So I'm pretty sure they had that education. And to Councilwoman Surgeon, they
do.
Lightly are aware that there's parking opportunities and don't want to pay that fee. So I do support increasing the fines.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I also called one of the companies that teach tractor trailer driving. And it is part of the course about, because the residential streets are not designed to take some of the weight like how the highways and the other streets are. And so,
Correct.
yes, that is taught about using residential streets, yes.
So to my colleagues, the voting members, should we postpone this until we get more information from Mr. Gale? Councilman Gale?
So this is a resolution asking the administration to do something. I don't know that we necessarily need to postpone it. I think we could send it back and approve it, because it sounds to me like ultimately we're looking for the administration to come back to us with an ordinance. They're not going to come back and amend this resolution. We want to see an actual ordinance, going to have to go to public hearing, the whole 9 yards. So I think we're fine sending this back to council and just keeping our thumb on the pulse to make sure we get something from administration in a reasonable time.
Okay, and okay, so do we have any other questions or comments from council members?
I do have to agree with Councilman Gale, because one of the maker of the resolution did require that the city look at either adjusting or creating an ordinance for this, and to actually come back to council or actually implement some kind of solutions. So I do agree with Councilman Gale on actually approving the resolution so it can go forward. But I would like to make an amendment to the resolution, because I think lots of people are frustrated, and would like to ask Mr. Gale, how much time are they looking at before you may have something reasonable, to come back to council with an ordinance?
Yeah, for you, Mr. Chair, certainly no objections to this body approving the resolution. I think what has been raised is totally fair. And in the resolution, it requests a 30-day report back. I think that is reasonable for us to complete this exercise.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilman LeBron?
Councilwoman Surgeon had my exact question.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, so do we have any more comments before we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, through you, Michael Looney, Director of Public Works, just wanted to jump on the call tonight and express my full support for Mr. Gale and Development Services and what they're working on here. As Councilwoman Surgeon very astutely pointed out, this is a significant issue for us in terms of removing snow and plowing, and also, quite frankly, just doing salting. It affects our operations when you go up Tower and you get to Heartland Street, you look down Heartland Street towards Manchester, and there's no way you can get a plow down there because there's an 18-wheeler or at least a tractor in the way. So then we have to spend more time getting someone in a much smaller truck to peel off from maybe salting the public safety complex parking lot and run up and do these other streets that we just can't fit our bigger trucks down. So it is quite problematic for us, and I've noticed it driving around, checking out how we're doing in terms of our plowing operations. A number of locations, New Park Avenue underneath 84 as you get south of Kane Street, and there's a couple other locations that jump out. Capitol Avenue between Forest and Laurel, I think, is
Hartford High. Yeah.
So yeah, everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about because everyone on this call drives around the city as much as I do. So I think it's pretty self-evident, and I just wanted to pop in for a minute and just express my support from our department to Mr. Gale and to DDS.
Thank you, Director Looney. And I just want to let the audience know that if you have or see a situation like this, it's in your neighborhood, do not hesitate to take a photo of the vehicle, of the tractor trailer, the tractor, or just a box. And that includes other large commercial vehicles. Take a photo and with an address of where it's located at, not only the street, but the number of the houses in front of, and then shoot an email with that photo to any of our council members so that we can forward it to the right authorities and have it removed, ticketed, and or at least have a conversation with the owner of that vehicle so they have a better understanding. Maybe give them a strike one without ticketing, but give them an opportunity to understand this cannot be done anymore and it would not be tolerated.
You're too kind, Mr. Chair. I'm sure they know.
Believe me, exactly. I'm sorry, but
Understood.
I'm sorry.
Understood.
I make a motion that we send this back to
Yes.
council with a favorable recommendation.
I second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? Abstain? Okay, so this resolution will go to council favorably. Thank you, everyone, for speaking on this resolution. It's very important, quality of life issue, right? So now we're moving on to our next item. And that item is a resolution authorizing a second round of pilot city-owned property transferred to the Hartford Land Bank Incorporated. And let me just scroll down to that right here. Yeah, so who do we have here to speak?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Director Matthews.
We're going to have two speakers. We have Peter, one of our senior project managers, speaking to the resolution on behalf of Development Services. And he'll be talking about the 13 properties we'll be transferring to the land bank. And he'll also be addressing the MOU. We have now prepared the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the land bank and the city into how going forward we'll transfer these various properties. And then Arun, who's the CEO of the land bank, will be making a short presentation as to what he's been doing for the last couple of months that he has been CEO to fully fill in the council members on what's going on and what he plans to do for the future. I should say to you, just to open, that the city through DDS have been very aggressive about foreclosures. As you all know, when you drive through the city as much as we do, you see a lot of what you may call blighted properties. And in many instances, the property owner is unable or unwilling to take care of those properties. So what we try to do, both internally with the Corporation Counsel's office and with the, this is a great looking guy in that picture there, and with the external counsel, is try to move as many properties as we can through foreclosure. As we speak, we have roughly 50 properties in various stages of foreclosure in the courts. Many of those will go to the land bank. And we have another 18 or 20 in the pipeline that will be moving through foreclosure. So we're being very aggressive about this. We're trying to work as hard as we can with the land bank to deal with these blighted properties and bring them back to useful life and put them back on the tax roll. So with that, let me first introduce Peter, one of our senior project managers, to kind of give a report, a quick presentation on, to put this whole thing in context, a quick presentation on what we're doing with the land bank on the 13 properties, and then talk a little bit about the MOU that we have executed with the land bank. Peter?
Good evening, councilors. My name is Peter Bryanton. I'm a senior project manager with Economic Development and Development Services. And thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Before the council is a resolution which would authorize the second pilot transfer of 13 city-owned properties to the Hartford Land Bank with the goal of private redevelopment and reuse. Tonight's presentation will provide some background about the city's program to transfer surplus city properties to the land bank, the proposed MOU and term sheet, and how we've gotten to this point so far. I'll go through the slides, and then I'll turn it over to the Chief Executive Officer of the Land Bank, Arun, and then I will, who will tell you about what they've done and their progress. So I just need to share my screen.
Great.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. Very good. So this, as I said previously, this is the second pilot transfer of city properties to the land bank. Two of the properties on the list are shown here, 71 Winchester Street and 68 Bonner Street, which is a vacant lot. In 2020, the city approved the transfer of 6 properties, and the land bank has made some real progress over the past 2 years with those properties. And those properties are 61 Charlotte Street, which is shown here in the picture being renovated. 103 Earl Street, which is sold. 128 Edgewood Street, which sold. 471 Garden Street sold. 196 Homestead Avenue sold. 59 Magnolia Street is to be demolished, and 78 Martin Street is undergoing renovations. In June of 2021, the City Council approved a second pilot with the Lot Next Door program. However, that approval did not move forward as the Lot Next Door program was discontinued by the land bank. In the interim, City Council desired to have a more formal relationship with the Hartford Land Bank through some type of agreement. So that agreement will be a memorandum of understanding, and in the along with the resolution is a term sheet which outlines an agreement, a 2-year agreement. And some of the highlights of that are that the city will provide the land bank with an eligible properties list to be reviewed and approved by its board of directors. Prior to taking ownership, Hartford Land Bank will submit a stabilization plan to the city to detail how properties will be secured, cleaned, and protected from future blight. Once transferred, the Hartford Land Bank will have 60 days to stabilize properties and solicit proposals from interested parties. The land bank will encourage its community partners to submit expressions of interest for opportunity to rehabilitate or construct new housing. The land bank agrees to work towards the goals of utilizing 50% Hartford-based minority contractors and preparing 25% of the properties for home ownership opportunities as a community benefit. And the Hartford Land Bank will provide quarterly reports to Development Services, which summarizes the status of all properties received from the city, excuse me. So in this second round revised, I should say, the property locations include 49 Anawan, 53 Benton Street, 68 Bonner Street, 647 Broadview Terrace, 176 Clark, 25H Edgewood Street, 3 on Garden Street, 36 Green Street, 138 Irvin Street, 287 Sargent Street, and as I said before, 71 Winchester, which is a home. So we in total have 11 vacant lots and 2 lots with housing structures. And just as an example, 287 Sargent Street was acquired through a blight foreclosure process. It's a residential 2-family home with just over 3,000 square feet. It has potential for home ownership, owner occupied with perhaps a renter on the other side. 104 Clark Street was acquired through tax lien foreclosure process. It's a vacant lot that's just over 8,000 square feet. And it has potential for a multifamily home development. So the Hartford Land Bank, the background of the land bank is it was established in August of 2017. The City of Hartford Court of Common Council adopted a resolution for the creation of the Hartford Land Bank to prevent contagious blight in our urban neighborhoods. And then the mission, as you can see, of the land bank is to identify, acquire, redevelop directly through partnership with government, nonprofit, private sectors, vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent structures, distressed properties in the city of Hartford. So, and you can visit their website at hartfordlandbank.com. And so that's my very brief presentation, and I will now turn it over to Arunan to fill you in on what they've been doing. And then at the end, we'll take questions. Arunan?
Sure, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Peter, for that background. I think that was really helpful. I'll just make a few quick notes on the slides you just saw. We have 4 properties, that's correct, that are currently, we've sold. They're with developers right now being developed. The land bank has a quick claim deed on all those properties. And so if any of those developers fail to develop those properties fully, we can pull them back. But we've been monitoring the progress. They've been staying on schedule and on pace and doing a good job. 196 Homestead, we just went out for an RFP on that. The RFP closed on the 18th of this month, and we are going to be meeting this week with our real estate committee to make a recommendation to our board at the upcoming board meeting, which is a week from today on Wednesday at noon, for a developer. We got 3 bids, all of them from Hartford natives, Hartford contractors, developers of color, which we really view as a success in our outreach, both through the developers cohort and generally our outreach to local developers. And 59 Magnolia actually has been demolished soon after our initial inspection of 59 Magnolia, and it was in the time right before I came on that was determined to be an unstable structure, and so it was demolished immediately. It's a very narrow lot, and so we are working with some neighboring property owners to turn it into a right-of-way, potentially with some diagonal parking spots to ease some of the parking demands in that area. But we will be working closely with. We have been working closely with the city's planning division and with neighborhoods with the neighbors in that Upper Albany neighborhood to do that. And 78 Martin Street, we have undertaken the renovations ourselves. It'll be a rather costly project. We think that the renovations will run well over $100,000, probably over $150,000 over what we anticipate the sale price of that house to be. And we don't think that is a cost that a developer can really eat. And we wanted to create something that is of real value there on Martin Street. I think there's real potential on Martin Street, and so we wanted to create a really good quality home there. So those are the first 7 properties that the city gave us at the beginning of last year. We're looking forward to this next allocation of properties. I think you are fairly familiar with the land bank as an entity. I will give you an update on sort of what we've done over the last few months. I think I've had this conversation with many of you individually, but we really feel like there is such potential. sorry, not sure if somebody's trying to jump in there. But we really think there's such potential with local Hartford-based developers to be the backbone of developing properties at the land bank. And we launched this developers cohort, which so many of you on council were there to either to help us launch, to publicize, to meet the participants at some point. And I want to start by saying thank you to all of you for that. We had tremendous response. We had almost 300 Hartford residents apply for the first 20 spots in the developers cohort. Of those 300 residents, 94% of them, at least 94% of them, were residents of color. The four biggest zip codes were 2 zip codes in the north end and 2 zip codes in the south end. There was a spread of ages. It was over 45% female applicants, and that diversity was reflected in our first class as well. So we were really happy with the initial class of the cohort. We ran the initial program in December, and we are working right now with HEDCO and to continue to layer on training for the folks who came through our program. We would love to run more of those programs. You know, I think it is both a testament to the quality of the first 20 participants in that program, and also a sad statement that it is easier to get into some Ivy League institutions than it was to get into our first developers cohort. But we really think that there are so many more Hartford residents who we can engage through this process and really make a pipeline, a sustainable pipeline that is in many ways stronger and more sustainable than the land bank itself, for Hartford residents to be at the center point of developing properties, but vacant and blighted properties in our city. But we have committed to our folks coming through the cohort that we would connect them, try to connect them with properties coming out of land bank and bridge the access to capital gap, in addition to ongoing training. And so as we get more properties from the city, our hope is to continue to run this cohort, because we really think that there's tremendous potential. And I believe more today than when we first launched this program, as a sort of shot in the dark, that there's great potential among Hartford residents. And I think, why wouldn't we invest in that? Why wouldn't we make our investments, make investments that build capital and build wealth in Hartford residents? We are looking forward to working with the city to continue to grow the pipeline of properties coming to the land bank. And thank you for your support on council, to you, Mr. Chair, and to all the other members of this committee. We really appreciate it. And I'm happy to take questions for the land bank, and I'll cede the floor.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mr. Bryanton, for the presentation, and Aruna, thank you so much. And thank you also for stepping up to the plate, becoming the CEO of the land bank. I look forward to seeing what more the land bank is capable of doing. I believe in the land bank. I truly and wholeheartedly support the land bank. And I will make the statement that, understanding that it's a good amount of property that's being handed over to the land bank right now. The unfortunate piece, in my opinion, is that only 2 of those property has structures. I'd like to see the potential of what the land bank is capable of doing when it comes to, let's say, a 3-unit family building, or a 6-unit apartment building, something larger, so we can definitely show what potentials you and your team have. And I think it's important, and thank you again for communicating this throughout the city and engaging with the small contractors and developers that we have here in the city, so that they get an opportunity to grow. So with that said, is there any questions from my colleagues? Councilwoman Rossetti, and then followed by Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to the Director of the Land Bank. Thank you, Mr. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is, Bryanton. I have a question. First question is from Mr. Bryanton's presentation. It states there will be eligible property list. How will that list be put together, and will the land bank have input to that list? That's my first question. Is it just going to be what Department of Developmental Services put together, or is it going to be a comprehensive coordination of what that list would be? That's my first question. I don't know if you want to answer that.
I will, through the chair, I think I will defer to Aaron Howard, the Director of Economic Development, for that question.
Thanks, Peter, and good evening, everyone, council members. I might actually have Charles and I participate on answering this question. I can see he's smiling, so I know he'd probably like to answer this as well. But I'd like to just point out that city properties, a lot of these properties that we're talking about are part of our blighted program. So blight tax foreclosure, where we take properties sometimes at tax deed sales if they don't sell at the tax deed sales. So what we do is whenever we, through this process, as we start to see what properties we're taking or we see what our pipeline projects are, we do an internal review. We review all the properties to make a determination if it makes sense in order for us. Sometimes it makes sense for the city to hold on to a piece of property for certain reasons, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And so we go through an analysis and a review. And then every time to date that we have done this process with the land bank, we have actually sat down and communicated those properties with the land bank and come to, worked with the land bank. We provide a list to Arun, and as we have properties that become available, and then the land bank goes through those properties, does their assessment to make a determination if those properties are there. That's how it's currently working. Charles, I don't know if you want to weigh in. You're on mute, Charles.
Hi, Charles.
So as he's trying to unmute, I will share that one of the other things that we're trying to do is we're working on developing a comprehensive inventory of our city-owned property. We had gone through that exercise about a year ago when we went through the first round of properties. Majority of the properties that we have in our inventory that are not deemed for future or are not tied up, either encumbered for some sort of development, like some of these properties we still have are dono related properties or Park and Main that still sit in our inventory. Most of what we have to date are vacant lots. We had started our aggressive move on blighted properties just before COVID hit. And so what we've actually seen over the past year is that a lot of the properties we were aggressively trying to go after got stalled during the no evictions, the court process and such. So we're only now just starting to see some of those properties through that effort come into the city's inventory over the last few months. The only other way we've taken stuff is through tax deed sales. The properties that we took in the last tax deed sale, for the majority, we retained. Those that we did not were vacant lots. Some of them are part of this list here. And then the last thing I'd point out is there was a period of properties, about 3-4 properties that we've had that have issues of tenancy. We actually have properties where we have to go through some eviction process. And so we're in the process of doing that. But the truth, we really don't have a lot of structures at this point in time, but we do anticipate receiving more, as Charles described in the beginning, through the blight process and the blight foreclosure process.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, I'm wondering if at the next meeting, Department of Developmental Services could produce a list of all the city-owned 1 to 3 family properties. I think that would be valuable for all of us to see, because again, certainly we're all working in this together, but I give kudos to my fellow CEO at the land bank. That's kind of an inside joke. And what they're, doing and what they're, proposing to do. And I feel that we should be the best resource they can be. So I would love to have at the next, through you, Mr. Chair, at the next PDH meeting, a list of those 1 to 3 families that the city owns. Other than that, I echo what my colleague said. I
Let's-
understand what you're saying, Ms. Howard, but really, property structures versus vacant lots to me doesn't seem,
Well, let me add to it. First of all, Councilwoman, we don't have that many 1 to 3 families, but we'll make them all available. And we're trying to make all those available to the land bank. Now, you should know, I mentioned this early on, we have 50 units of housing in various stages of foreclosure. Of those 50 units, 30 have parcels on them and roughly 20 are vacant lots. So now that the court system is fully operational, we fully anticipate over the next 2 to 3 months having more parcels with buildings on it. And our goal is to transfer those parcels to the land bank and get them ready. We have another 20 or so parcels that's in the pipeline with structures on them that may in fact be going into various stages of foreclosure. So as time goes on, we'll have more properties with 1 to 3 families. And the last time we met with Arun, he also said he would be interested in 6 families. So we're now looking to see if we have some 6 families that may also be doable. So we're trying to make sure that we fully understand and we appreciate that the land bank can be much more effective if they have 1, 2, and 3 families as well as vacant lots.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair. And I look forward to those list of properties. And yes, please include the 6 families. Thank you.
Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Not sure if this is to Peter or Aaron. Looking at the terms of agreement, I'm looking at the community benefit. And under the community benefit, Peter, it says the goal is utilizing 50% for Hartford-based minority contractors and preparing 25% of the property for home ownership. And if out of 13 properties that we're transferring, I know there's a few empty lots. So what is 25% of the numbers of properties we're transferring over to you that could become home ownership? 3, 4 out of 10 pieces of property?
Yeah, and through the chair, that would be for this round, but we anticipate several more rounds coming. So that 50% and 25% would be for all of the rounds.
All of the rounds, okay.
I might add to the chair, our goal through this MOU is to try to transfer 30 parcels over to the land bank each year. So we're looking at 30 as a goal. Hopefully we can do a bit more, but our goal is 30 parcels. So you have to look at the 25% and the 50% in terms of the 30 over the course of the year.
And I thought one of the mission and the objective, the vision of the land bank is trying to get to more home ownership more than anything else. So if it's 50% the developers, is that 50% non-ownership or developer owns? Can somebody help me out here?
Not sure.
Yeah, Ronan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, could you clarify that the 50% minority contractors, is that?
So I'm just trying to find out, if we're going to just use the figure of 30 houses or 30 parcels. And if our objective is to try to get home ownership out of these, maybe they're not all homes, but maybe there's some land. I thought our vision or our mission with the land bank is trying to increase our home ownership in the city. So I'm trying to find out how many of this are going to be going to developers who are not going to be homeowners.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That makes sense. Through you, Mr. Chair. Our goal is for local developers to create home ownership where they can create home ownership, where the properties, make those numbers make sense in every case in which we can turn a property into a owner occupied property. We will incentivize that, and we are actively looking to find the financial incentives to do that. One of the difficulties we have with home ownership in the city is that, this has to do specifically with structures, because building from scratch is obviously even more expensive than renovating a structure on a vacant lot. But with structures, very often with most of our structures, it costs more to redevelop it than you can sell that structure for to a homeowner in that neighborhood. And so without some market intervention, without some dollars to fill that gap between the redevelopment costs and what you can sell it for to a homeowner, it makes it impossible for home ownership to exist. And so that's why when these structures are on an open market, they get snatched up by investors from out of town who make really minimal rental grade improvements on them and rent them out indefinitely, because that's what the financial incentive dictates. And so the land bank is trying to find money from as many sources as we can to provide subsidies to our developers on these projects to build home ownership that we will give them at the sale of that property to a homeowner with a requirement that it stays owner occupied for some portion of time. But our goal, frankly, if on the structures we get, again, differentiating the structures from the vacant lots is to try to push more than 25% of them into far more than 25% of them into home ownership, because we have the lowest home ownership rate in the state, in the city of Hartford, as you all know well, at 24%. In a lot of our neighborhoods, that single digit home that drops to single digits. In my neighborhood, it's 8% home ownership, and it makes it impossible for the predominantly Black and brown families that live in those neighborhoods to build generational wealth. And we are really committed to turning that tide, and are really committed to finding the dollars to do that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that commitment, Arun, and I know you are definitely committed to that vision for homeownership for the generational wealth in the city. Not sure if it's through you, Aaron, or to Mr. Matthews. So would the MOU come back to the city, come back to the city council for approval, or is it something that we won't see? Or is this the MOU which I'm reading here?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Charles.
No. Yes, the MOU you're reading, and once you approve it, I assume either I or the mayor will sign it, Aaron?
So what the council actually has before them, I believe, are the terms within the MOU.
Right.
Typically, we present the terms in the term sheet. We go ahead and the entire MOU will reflect the terms on the term sheet. And then there may be other just minor things, as it's typical for us. We don't usually bring the actual MOU to council. We just bring the business terms, and then we work through our legal team to finalize all the terms and conditions within that contract. But these terms that are before you are the high level material terms that, once this is approved, must be part of that overall agreement.
Okay. And I really do, through you again, Mr. Chair, the reporting process, coming back on a quarterly basis or annual reporting basis, so the city council can understand, what is going on with these properties that we have transferred over to the land bank. So I really do like that part of the terms. And also through you, Aaron, the disposition process. So for the 30 properties that we're going to be doing for the next several years, they will follow this disposition process from day 1 to 540 days. What happens after that if the property is not sold or is not occupied? Does the property come back to the city? What happens after those days?
So just for clarity, any property coming from the city to the land bank would have to go through the process we're going through right now as it stands. So it would have to go through the council process and all of that. What we tried to do is we tried to build into the MOU some performance standards for the land bank. And so the goal is to get these properties into the hands of either a developer or a homeowner very quickly. And so we put these timelines and measures into the MOU for goals for the land bank. We obviously will do everything we can to work with the land bank in the event that after a year, if they haven't been able to be successful, the city will continue to work with the land bank and figure out different ways on how they can market the property. Sometimes the market may dictate what happens to these properties. I don't see us taking properties back. I don't think that's going to happen in this situation, but there may be scenarios where the land bank in general, technically by definition of a land bank, can hold on to property for a period of time. So the land bank may in the future have reasons to hold property for a period. Maybe they're looking at a property next door. Maybe they're trying to do something a little bit bigger. So there's a lot of different reasons it could stay, but we put these measures in place for the land bank because ultimately for the city, we are transferring these properties that are blighted to the land bank because we're trying to address the blighted condition within the city. So our goal is that the land bank takes these properties, invests in them, and transfers them into the hands and to turn them back into productive tax producing properties for the city of Hartford. And part of the reason we have the land bank is so that they can do it faster than the city. So we move the properties, they make the investment. We now have improved the neighborhoods and these blighted properties in those conditions. That's our ultimate goal. Arunan, I don't know if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to address that as well. I'll tell you, I don't anticipate us on any of the properties coming up, at least taking anywhere close to that time frame. We have now a large group of developers that we've taken through our program. We have a number of other developers, smaller scale developers in the city of Hartford, who we have had regular contact with, who are ready to take on properties, who are itching to take on properties. And I think our issue is more likely going to be that we won't be able to get properties out the door quickly enough to meet the need. I think that there is a real pipeline of local developers who are ready to take on those properties. And to your earlier point, Councilman Surgeon, again through you, Mr. Chair, I also really look forward to having quarterly reports. I think to the extent that we can, we really want to be transparent about this process, about the properties coming through the land bank. I think it's in the interest of the council. I think it's in the interest of the residents of the city of Hartford, and any way in which we can increase that transparency, we're all for. I think it's really important for building public trust and for the role of the land bank. So we appreciate that and are looking forward to that.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules.
Thank you. Here, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. First, just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Certainly commendable, your leadership, Arunan. I am always super excited about programs and initiatives that are both wealth building strategies, as well as ways to increase the tax revenue here in the city. And so removing blighted properties, increasing our tax rolls, while also simultaneously putting assets in the hands of residents and local developers that can change their socioeconomic trajectory is super important. So I just had a couple of observations, and I'm just wondering with respect to the MOU, or this could be something down the line that could be thought about, since we've all seemed to express the shared commitment of both wealth building as well as increasing the tax revenue. As the city is evaluating blighted properties and determining whether they should be sold through a tax lien or given to organizations such as the land bank, would it not make sense to allow or afford organizations such as the land bank to a right of first refusal for certain properties that are potentially going to the tax roll. Because as we know, when those properties are sold through the tax lien process, there's very little control over obviously who purchases them. People are purchasing these properties for pennies on the dollars. A lot of time it's an outside investor who doesn't have the same vested interest in the city or in our community that the land bank and those who participate in the cohort have. So it's just something to think about. Possibly, I recalled, at least I thought when I first moved to Hartford, that certain organizations did have a right of first refusal to properties that were deemed blighted or gonna be going to the tax lien, that those organizations would be the first ones to possibly bid on those properties because they are putting them back to good use. And we know who they are. They're trusted partners in our community. So just thinking about potentially adding something like that to the MOU, or maybe something for the future. The second observation was, I remember a few weeks back that Director Charles Matthews did a wonderful overview about all the development that's going to be happening in the community. And so one of the things I was thinking is, how do we partner with some of our smaller local developers? And so it seems like this would be a great opportunity in those projects that are anticipated to be coming down the pike, to think about some of the properties that are blighted in the catchment area of those properties and how there can be some collaboration with partners such as the land bank, because not only does that ensure an increased capacity of beautification, but it also is a way to help those smaller developers increase their portfolio. And it just expresses a much larger vision about redevelopment and economic investment in our communities. So just something to be thinking about, because that was a wonderful presentation that Director Matthews gave us, and there was a lot coming, and it seems like there could be potential for some cross collaboration between our partners.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules. Any other questions from my colleagues, comments?
If I may just respond to the Councilwoman. In a strange sort of way, we in DDS, we have to feed a lot of people. Our primary point of contact, the primary client we have, we want to give as many properties as we can to the land bank. You heard from Arun's presentation. He's committed and he's going to do a great job with those properties with his cohort of small minority contractors. Also, what we're trying to do is for those properties that may in fact be in the West End, for example, we have NINA. So every now and then there might be one or two properties that we may want to do with NINA because we want to keep them working and their crews working too. And then we have Signer in the South End, and they have properties every now and then. They will say to us they want to be able to get those particular properties. Then we have Habitat in the Northeast, and they focus on vacant lots. So we try to make sure we give some vacant lots to Habitat. And then, quite honestly, as you heard in the presentation, we have minority firms that are trying desperately to get blighted properties, to convert those blighted properties. So we're trying to keep everyone fed, so to speak. So we'll keep all parties working. But our primary contact, because we think Arun has capacity to give him more of those properties, when eye on trying to keep NINA, Signer, and Habitat and the small minority firms also fed with some properties that they can keep working. It's not a challenge, but it depends on how many properties we can grab from the tax deed sale and how many properties we can get in the foreclosure process. But we're keenly aware of what we need to do to keep everyone moving and working.
If I may, Charles, I'd also add from a legal perspective, when we take property through a tax deed sale or a tax foreclosure, we have to follow statutory requirements in that process. And so, for example, when we have a blight lien or a blight, we go after a property for a blight foreclosure, we're foreclosing on whatever the value of that blight lien is, and it goes in through the court process. And if the blight liens, if there's not enough debt against the property, there's too much, if the blight liens don't equate to much and there's more equity in the value of the property, the courts will force a foreclosure by sale rather than a strict foreclosure to the city. And so we do not have control in those instances what happens to those properties in those scenarios. For a tax deed sale, that's also statutorily driven. And these are scenarios where property owners are given an ample amount of time to come to the table to pay off their taxes. Even at a tax deed sale, even if they don't claim the property or pay their taxes at the time of the sale, there's still a 6-month redemption period before, and they're given an opportunity to get their properties back. So it's actually easier when we have title to do these things at that point when the city has it. But it's not as simple. We don't have as much control during that foreclosure process as one would think, unless the value of the blight lien or the tax lien is so high that no other entity can claim stake to that property, and we take title to that property at that time.
Too much detail.
Thank you. Any other colleagues? Councilman LeBron?
Director Matthew, so I think you're unmuted, Director Matthew, just as a FYI.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Again? No, I think I'm okay. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. No. So yeah. So I think, so first of all, thank you for the presentation. I've spoken for Mr. Bryanton, and then I've spoken to Arunan several times and his team, and super excited of what the land bank can bring and the potential opportunities. I know some of the developers personally who have talked to me glowingly about, the experiences that they've had. I've witnessed one session, and I just really excited about this opportunity and all that it encompasses. I do want to just bring up one thing in terms of, and this has nothing to do with the land bank, but what happens is oftentimes, unless, in my experience, is that the novelty, everything kind of just, land bank is new, it's novel, while we have these other organizations that exist. And so this isn't a question, it's more of a comment and kind of an awareness. And I know I'm new to PEDH, and I'll learn these processes more that I'll go along with the meetings. But it might behoove us, because we have this landscape of all of these organizations who are kind of in the same work, or at least trying. And so, there's the world of collaboration and competition. And so it's often very difficult to navigate, and this is not my term, I learned this from someone else, the term called collaboration. And so in order to navigate that world of collaboration and to prevent potential constraints on systems, it might behoove us to create a process or a system of controls that is based upon objective definitions and objective results, around production or whatever metrics you guys use. And so that way the city won't be on the hook for any, if you will, inside baseball. And I always caution to use sports terms because it makes me seem like that I'm simple in that way, but I just relate things to the things that I know. And so just more of a comment that, to put these systems of controls in, because I can see in the future that something as great and novel and as land bank, but all of a sudden it becomes stagnated because of the noise of potential conflicts in the future around subjectivity. And so the further we remove subjectivity, the better. I'm sorry, I belabored the point, but thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I always do that at the end. I should do it in the beginning. I have to remind myself. Thank you.
Don't worry,
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Hercules.
Mr. Chair, could I address this? I'm sorry, I don't mean
Yes,
to
absolutely.
cut off the councilwoman. But can I just address that directly?
Yeah, I had a response to Councilman LeBron's comments, if I can, just very, very quickly through you.
Absolutely.
I would say it might behoove us to have a more thorough discussion about the different entities, because they are very different, I would say, in their missions as well as in how they carry them out. Myself having sat on boards of some of them and having a little bit more up close knowledge, I would say that the land bank is the only organization that does what it does. in that extra layer of creating generational wealth with the local developers, and not to snide any of the other organizations because they're all great. And so I think possibly at an upcoming meeting, we may want to have a discussion or even have presentations by all the different organizations so that you can see that they are very different in the way that they carry out their mission. And so there may be a lot less avenue for the competition. It's not as much as probably is perceived. And I would also argue that there's probably enough properties that need repair and remediation throughout our city that everyone will probably be working for a long time. It's just figuring out how to get the properties through some of the processes that were described earlier by Aaron, by Ms. Howard, figuring out how to get over some of that bureaucracy to get those properties to the city, get title to the city, and then hand them over to the organizations.
Well said. Aruna?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilwoman Hercules and Councilman LeBron for those comments. This is just a clarification going off of that. Under the terms of this MOU, if a SINA or a NINA were to express interest in a property that came to the land bank within their sort of territory, the land bank is bound under the terms to transfer those properties for the same cost, in most of these cases for free to those entities within those regions, as long as their plan for the properties comports with our shared goals. And so, I think that there is a lot of collaboration. I speak regularly to the heads of all of those organizations, but in addition to that, it is a sort of objective requirement under the terms of this MOU that within those territories, those entities get essentially first dibs on those properties.
Thank you, Aruna. Okay, do we have any other questions from members? Okay. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for the presentation and the conversation on this. I'm excited for the land bank and again, what the future may bring and will bring. So I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilman Gale?
Move that we send this back to council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this will go to council favorably, passed. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your input. And I will let you know now that I am planning to reach out to my members here on PEDH to see if we can have a special meeting in the near future where we can have that conversation and have a collaboration with all of our small developers in both, within the city, both South Park Street, North End, what have you, so that we can have a very sincere conversation on what priorities each neighborhood may have. So that we can work on that and then and create that collaboration with the contractors as well. So thank you, everyone. Is there any other discussions before we adjourn? No? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and stay warm.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yes.
Good night.